Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. If you've ever felt like your whole life was the setup to a joke only one person laughed at, I've been there, and I let the punchline play out longer than I probably should have. Last Tuesday, my ex-wife left me 5 voicemails in under 7 minutes. I didn't answer. She texted after. Please call me. This can't be real. Tell me it's not true. Then another. Did you seriously make that much? While we were still together, I put my phone down. Went back to slicing onions. I was cooking dinner with my fiancé, who, by the way, knows everything about me, including the $1.5 million I made after Fiona walked out of my life without blinking. She thought I was still the guy who clipped coupons and wore the same sneakers from college. She thought she was trading down, letting go of the weight, moving on to something shinier. But here's what actually happened. 6 months ago, Fiona stood in the kitchen holding a glass of Cabernet, telling me she felt spiritually claustrophobic. That's how she phrased it. Not unhappy, not neglected, just energetically stifled. Whatever that meant. Then she said it. I need space to grow. And I think we both know I've outgrown this. She gestured around the room like we lived in a swamp. Not a modest but perfectly fine apartment in Bellevue with a fully paid off car and no debt. I didn't argue. I just nodded. That's what I did back then. I nodded, like a sad plant in a forgotten windowsill. She packed quickly. Took her favorite suitcase, the espresso machine, and half the bath towels. She left her wedding ring on the counter. No note, no goodbye kiss, just silence and a scented candle still burning in the bathroom. What Fiona never knew was that during those sleepless nights she mocked. When I stayed up, playing with my little side projects, I was quietly building something people would pay serious money for. A minimal latency communication framework for encrypted remote teams. Sounds boring, makes money. I never told her I was beta testing with early clients. I never told her I had secured pre-seed funding from a startup incubator. I especially didn't tell her when a mid-range Silicon Valley firm asked to acquire it outright. By the time the ink dried on the deal and the first payment hit my account, Fiona was 3 weeks gone. She thought she'd dumped a loser, a liability. A man she'd described to her friends as sweet but stuck. She had no idea I was sitting on a 7-figure payout, and a second offer from a consulting group that wanted to put me on retainer for more than her entire annual salary. I told no one. Not at first. I let her live in her fantasy. But then came the party. You won't believe what happened at that party. It was one of those rooftop cocktail events she used to drag me to, where people spoke in vague metaphors about scaling vision and curating spaces, whatever that meant. I didn't go for the scene. I went because my new business partner, Garrett, thought it would be good for networking. I wore a tailored navy jacket that I hadn't even taken the tags off yet. The shoes were real leather, and for once, I didn't feel like a background character in someone else's highlight reel. I didn't expect to see her there. Fiona. She looked exactly the same, perfectly calculated, from her smoky eyes to the way she sipped her drink like it was a performance. She was with a tall guy in a velvet blazer who clearly thought he was the event's main character. They were mid-laugh when her eyes flicked over and landed on me. At first, nothing, just a glance. Then confusion. Then realization. You'd think the first thing she'd say would be something polite, maybe even snarky. Instead, she froze. Her smile disappeared mid-sentence. She actually stepped back a little, like seeing me in that setting didn't compute. I wasn't in my usual faded hoodie or clearance rack jeans. I wasn't holding a plate of free cheese cubes. I looked expensive. I didn't say a word, just nodded slightly and turned back toward the group I was with. One of the investors laughed at something I said about onboarding challenges, and someone clapped me on the back. That's when I saw her turn to her date and whisper something, eyebrows furrowed. She didn't recognize the world I was in now, and definitely didn't expect me to be in it. She tried to play it cool, I'll give her that. 10 minutes later, she wandered over with her glass in hand, wearing that same fake warm smile she used on clients she couldn't stand. Ellery, she said, like she wasn't sure. I just nodded. Wow, it's been a while. I nodded again. So, you're here with someone? Her voice tried to stay casual, but I heard the crack in it. Yeah, I said. Garrett, he and I co-founded Klystrom. I didn't explain what Klystrom was. If she wanted to know, she could Google it, or read the TechCurrent article that dropped that morning. But judging by the way her grip tightened around the glass, she already had. She opened her mouth like she wanted to ask something else, but then her date called her name and she walked off. That night, she texted me, "You looked different. I didn't know you were doing that well. Congrats." Then another, "We should catch up sometime. Just talk." I stared at the messages, heart pounding, not from hope, but from the power shift. The same woman who left me for being comfortable with crumbs was now realizing she threw away the whole bakery. I didn't reply. Not yet. 3 days after that rooftop party, I got a box in the mail. No note. Just a bottle of whiskey I once said I liked during a weekend trip we took 3 years ago, back when we were still pretending we understood each other. Same brand, same label, same limited release. I stared at it like it might explode. Who still remembers something like that, unless they're trying to make a point? A few hours later, her name popped up on my phone again, this time with a text that simply read, "Hope you're doing okay." Doing okay? I almost laughed. That was her version of testing the waters, tossing a pebble into the deep end to see if I'd still come swimming. I didn't reply. I left the whiskey sealed, untouched, a reminder that I was no longer that version of myself, the one who would have clung to any scrap of affection she threw my way. That guy was gone, but apparently she didn't get the memo. The next morning, I got a call from Marla, one of her old friends, the kind of friend who smiled too much, but was always quietly collecting information for later gossip. "Fiona's been off," she said carefully. "She told me she saw you at that party and, well, she didn't know you'd done so well. She thought you were still, you know." I didn't say anything. She continued. She mentioned she might have made a mistake. "Leaving. Thought I should tell you. That told me everything I needed to know." Fiona wasn't just surprised, she was spiraling. By the end of the week, she emailed me. A full essay-length apology, the kind that sounds deep until you realize it's made entirely of recycled excuses. She talked about how the timing was wrong, how she was confused, how she didn't understand how much pressure I was under. She said leaving was a wake-up call for both of us. She even ended it with, "Maybe we were meant to grow separately so we could come back stronger." I reread that line 5 times. Stronger? She left me on silent, without closure, without even bothering to ask what I was building or how I was really doing. And now that she sees what she lost, she wants to call it a detour. That was the moment I realized she wasn't apologizing to me. She was apologizing to the version of me that benefited her again. I didn't reply. I didn't expect her to show up at my office, not in person, not unannounced, and definitely not wearing the same perfume I bought her 3 birthdays ago, the one she said was too heavy back then. I caught the scent before I saw her. It hit me like a flashback I didn't ask for. She was standing at the glass entrance, talking to the receptionist like she had every right to be there, dressed sharp, professional. But her eyes betrayed the panic she was trying to hide under all that fake poise. Garrett looked at me across the room. "Friend of yours?" he said, half grinning. I didn't answer. I walked to the front slowly, each step heavy, unsure if I was more annoyed or curious. "Fiona?" I asked flatly. She turned around too fast, like she thought hearing her name meant she still had a place in my world. "Ellery?" she exhaled, almost like it was a relief. I was hoping we could talk. Right there, in front of everyone. No appointment, no warning. Just an ex-wife with regret in her throat and a mission in her eyes. I told her we could go downstairs for 5 minutes. Not because I owed her, but because I wanted to see how far she'd twist herself trying to crawl back. She started with compliments. How polished I looked. How proud she was of my success. How she never doubted I'd make it someday. A bold-faced lie she delivered with a straight face. Then came the big pitch. I was thinking, maybe we could get dinner sometime. No pressure, just to reconnect. I miss our conversations. That one almost made me laugh. Conversations? She used to scroll Instagram while I spoke. She used to interrupt me mid-sentence to comment on someone else's kitchen remodel. But I just nodded slowly and said, "You miss me, or you miss the version of me that fits into the life you wish you hadn't abandoned?" She flinched, a real one. That's when I knew she hadn't come for closure. She'd come because the math stopped adding up without me in it. I didn't say no. I didn't say yes. I told her I was busy, that maybe I'd call her sometime. She smiled tightly, thanked me for the grace, and walked out like she hadn't just stepped into a world that didn't need her anymore. I stood there for a long time after, not because I was shaken, but because it hit me how quickly guilt can disguise itself as affection. She didn't miss me. She missed the access. And that's when I decided it would have been easier if she just disappeared again. If she ghosted, blocked me, moved on like she'd planned to before. But Fiona didn't retreat. She doubled down. The next week, she invited me to what she called a casual evening hangout. No labels, no expectations. Just a small group at her friend's loft downtown. I don't know why I said yes. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I wanted to see how far she'd pretend the past didn't exist. Maybe I just wanted to watch her squirm. The loft was packed with the kind of people she used to wish I was more like. Influencer types, overstyled hair, fake confidence, conversations that all felt like networking disguised as friendship. She greeted me like I was her date, touched my arm, laughed too hard at things I didn't say, introduced me to people like I was her partner again, conveniently skipping over the part where she'd once labeled me the reason she felt stuck. Then she introduced me to Colby, her friend. Just a friend. His hand lingered on her waist a second too long when they hugged. His smile was a little too smug when we shook hands. I knew immediately. This was the man she replaced me with, or tried to. The same one from the Tulum photos she claimed were solo healing. And now, here she was, pretending I was someone she still had a right to pull close. Later in the night, she pulled me aside to the balcony with a glass of red wine, and a look like she was about to deliver some life-changing idea. "I've been thinking," she said, "we don't have to define anything yet. We could take a trip together, clear our heads, maybe Greece. You always wanted to go, right?" I stared at her, stunned. A woman who ghosted our marriage, who called me invisible, was now inviting me to fly across the world to maybe reconcile. I almost asked if Colby would be joining, but I didn't. I just stood there, watching her build a fantasy around a man she thought would fall back in line. So I asked her one thing. "Why now?" She blinked, then, with complete seriousness, said, "Because now I see what you're capable of, and I think you need someone who understands your world." It was the most revealing thing she could have said, not because it was flattering, but because it proved what I already knew. She never wanted me. She wanted what I'd become without her. I didn't speak to Fiona for 2 weeks after that rooftop ambush in heels and perfume. I thought that would be enough of a message. I ignored the texts, deleted the missed calls, and let her emails pile up into a thread that looked more like a diary entry than a conversation. But then came the real curveball. Garrett invited her to our quarterly mixer. He had no idea what she meant to me. To him, she was just another well-connected name on the PR scene. Someone he'd met once at the rooftop party. Someone who might be good to loop in. I wanted to tell him to uninvite her, but I didn't. That was the old version of me. Scared, avoiding discomfort, always shrinking to make space for people who never gave me any. So I let her come. And she came prepared. She arrived 30 minutes early, dressed like she was about to receive an award. Hair styled to perfection. Earrings. I'm pretty sure I once gave her, though she claimed they were too much back then. She floated around the room like she belonged there, shaking hands, smiling like she had stock in everyone's future. And then, in front of 3 of my colleagues, she said it. "We've been reconnecting lately. It's been healing. Honestly, I always knew Ellery would find his moment. I supported his ideas from the beginning, even when they weren't easy to understand. I stared at her like she'd just rewritten my entire life in real time. Supported? She called my work a hobby at best, and digital clutter at worst. She told me once she felt secondhand embarrassment whenever I spoke about back-end development in public. The worst part? My colleagues smiled, nodded. Some of them believed her, or wanted to. It made for a good story. The ex who stayed kind, the visionary wife who always believed. I didn't call her out, not then, not in front of the room. But when she tried to pull me aside again, I didn't let her. I leaned in and whispered, "You can wear the jewelry, Fiona, but you don't get to wear the story." Then I turned and walked back to a conversation that didn't include her. For the first time, she didn't follow. But I knew this wasn't over. She didn't want closure. She wanted credit. Fiona thought she was being clever. She always had this unshakable belief that charm could erase memory, that if she spoke softly enough and smiled at the right people, she could rewrite the past in real time, right in front of the people who never lived it. But what she didn't realize, what she never bothered to consider, was that I had kept everything. All the old texts, all the emails, even the voice notes she left when she thought I was too boring to be worth a real breakup. I never saved them out of spite. Back then, I saved them because I needed to remember that it wasn't all in my head, that I hadn't imagined the condescension, the subtle digs, the way she rolled her eyes when I spoke about my project like it mattered. Now, those files had turned into something else entirely. Receipts, evidence, a defense against the story she was spinning for her own redemption arc. It all came to a head at a panel I was speaking on. Yes, topic. Founders and burnout, what they don't tell you. Fiona showed up, front row, smiling like she belonged there. Afterward, during the networking mixer, she hovered near me, as if we were still a team. She introduced herself to a VC I'd just pitched as my early emotional investor. I almost choked on my drink. The man smiled politely, turned to me, and said, "She sounds like she was a big part of your foundation." That was the moment I made my choice. 2 days later, I scheduled a call. Just her and me. She arrived thinking I was going to cave, that I'd finally admit I missed her, that I still valued her opinion. She wore the same perfume. She did that thing where she touched her necklace when she was pretending to be vulnerable. I didn't even sit down. Instead, I played back one of her old voice messages. The one where she said, "I feel like I'm babysitting a man who thinks the internet is going to make him rich." She froze. I hit pause and said, "You don't get to rewrite me, Fiona. Not after walking out while I was building the very thing you now want to be part of." She said nothing. For the first time since she returned to my life, her silence wasn't strategic. It was stunned. I walked to the door, opened it, and said, "We're done pretending." And I meant it. Fiona's final move came in the form of an invitation, a charity gala hosted by one of the firms we used to dream about being invited to. I wasn't planning on going. I had nothing to prove anymore. But then I got the forwarded email from a colleague. Her name was listed as one of the special guest contributors for a panel on resilience through reinvention, and listed beneath her name a short bio that described her as a foundational partner in the development of Klystrom. My company. My life's work. She'd tried to make herself part of my origin story in front of some of the most connected people in the city. So I went. I didn't go alone. I brought Paige, my fiancée, the woman who saw me when no one else did, who sat beside me when I was broke and buried in the code and anxiety, who brought me tea at 1 a.m. without asking questions. Paige walked into that ballroom like a quiet storm, elegant, confident, effortless. And when Fiona saw me walk in with her, she stopped mid-sentence on stage, her voice caught. People noticed. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to expose Fiona in front of everyone. Because the truth was already doing the work. People knew who built Klystrom. They knew who stayed and who walked away. After the panel, she tried to approach me. Paige gently took my hand before Fiona could get too close. I smiled, nodded politely, and kept walking. That was the last time I ever saw her. It's strange, how life twists in ways you never expect. I used to think I needed closure from Fiona. I thought I needed her apology, her acknowledgement. But I didn't. I just needed to outgrow the version of myself who thought her validation mattered. Now, I'm in a place where I wake up grateful, not bitter, where I'm building something real, not just in business, but in love, too. The life I have now isn't a revenge fantasy. It's just peace. And honestly, that's the best ending I could have asked for. Thanks for watching this story on Reddit Confessions. If you've ever had someone walk away from you thinking you were nothing, only to realize later you were everything, drop a comment below. Or, better yet, tell us about a surprising moment in history that changed everything when no one saw it coming. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, keep your standards high and your silence strategic.